Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron, and today I have with me very special guest, my cousin Dominic. He's a great guy. He is a firefighter. I love talking to him. I only bring the best conversations on here for all of you out there, and for us. So say hi, Dominic.
Hi, Dominic.
There you
Hey,
go.
Aaron. It is a pleasure to be on your podcast. I can't help but notice that you didn't talk about how good I make bald look. So if you want to throw that in, I think that would be
I
awesome.
was saving the man crush for later. Okay,
Okay, that's fine. We can different podcast. You got it.
for later on in the podcast, right?
Okay, perfect. We can do that too.
Okay.
We'll double dip
Well, good. Thanks for joining me today. What an honor. Like
for sure.
I've had a few other family members on here too, like my brother. I think that's the only other one. But a lot of veteran family. And so it's just really nice to welcome you into the group and to immortalize you to some extent here and me and this conversation. But yeah, where are we starting today? I think, you had mentioned to me earlier that you had some firefighter stories, and you
Sure.
had been thinking about them. And you had mentioned you wanted to talk about a structural collapse that happened, which you'd have to tell everybody what that is. Which one do you want to do,
For sure.
or both?
We can start with either or. I feel like the most interesting thing that's happened to me recently is probably having pieces of having a chimney fall on me was
Yes.
interesting. Hadn't experienced anything like that before. So other than that, I feel like we got some weird, somewhat morbid firefighter stories I can tell you, and some maybe funny ones just about the kind of people that like to be firefighters, which are
That sounds like a good
pretty
place to start.
goofy guys in general.
Yeah.
There you go.
Get us started.
So
Let's go.
yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you about the collapse that happened. It was kind of funny before the shift started. I remember thinking that I could probably go for a little vacation. I'd been working pretty hard for a while and was kind of daydreaming about having like a few weeks off to just go camping and fishing and hanging out and stuff. And so thinking about I could use a little vacation. And then I had this shift, this was a couple months ago, but I had that shift where I ended up getting injured. And I remember sitting in the hospital thinking, well, this is a vacation of sorts for sure. Getting hurt, able to take a few months off. So anyway, it was a pretty normal shift. It was our second day. So the fire department works, or at least the Laramie Fire Department, various schedules, but Laramie Fire Department works 48 hours on, so 2 days on shift. You're basically living at the firehouse. You got a kitchen, you got bedrooms, everything. So you're living there for 2 days. You got at least two roommates, depending on what station you're in. I was the station one at the time, so it was me and four other firefighters and a paramedic, if I recall correctly. And then you get 4 days off. So you work 48 hours on, 96 hours off.
Mm.
So it's a pretty sweet schedule. Makes it hard to go back to a 9 to 5
Yeah.
job for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And I feel like only half the time you feel like you're working the fire department because you're working with some cool guys. For the most part, it's just doing something kind of hard, but with people you enjoy being around. So it
Mm.
doesn't really feel like work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was the second day on shift. So we first day probably full of some pretty routine medical calls. We're also the ambulance. We're the transport facility in Laramie, so we run fire calls, but mostly we run medicals. It's probably about 90% medical calls
Okay.
as far as I think most fire departments. Fires really don't make up that enormous of a percentage of our time. Probably first day pretty relaxed medical calls, doing some training. We generally go from about 8 a.m. is when the shift starts on day one, but about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. is when you're expected to be doing something productive, whether it's training or working on apparatus or obviously running calls. We do that the whole shift, but you're expected to be in kind of work mode. But after 5 o'clock, that's when it turns into if you got your own stuff you want to work on, you can do that. If you want to hang out and watch a movie with the guys and eat some dinner, that's fine too. It's basically after 5, from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. That's like your time to kind of do what you want to do, depending on the day. And so this was day two at this point. Pretty unremarkable day. Getting some training in, doing running calls, stuff like that. And then we got a fire call in the county at around, I want to say it was 10:30 at night or so. which it's impressive how many fires take place at nighttime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a fire around probably 10:30 or 11 or so, uh, and it was in the county. So it wasn't Laramie Fire Department is responsible for the city of Laramie, but we're also the only transport service within the entirety of Albany County in Wyoming. And so sometimes we might have to drive an hour or so just to get to where the patient is.
Mm.
Luckily, this county fire was pretty close to the city. And it was a little bit of a weird situation. The station that normally would respond based on proximity to this structural fire was one of the guys was out doing a hospital transfer. So since we're the ambulance company, we also pick up patients from our hospital and transport them to hospitals in Colorado. We transport them to Cheyenne. So if there's more significant needs than our hospital can do, then we just take them out. The station that normally would have responded only had two guys instead of three, and we never run a fire call with just two guys
Mm.
because structure fires are pretty intense. So you need at least three, ideally more. For a county call, we'll normally hope to have at least three, if not four people running
Mm.
that. So kind of a weird call as far as the normal station not being in service to be able to take this call. So we sent a different station out, but they wanted somebody to go with this other station. This was station three. They wanted somebody to go with station three so they could have a full crew of four firefighters. So it's kind of funny how quick this happened where it was brought up at station one, somebody's got to go on this call. Who wants to go? And it was me and another guy that could have gone. I like fires, but also I've been there for a little while. This guy was newer. And so I figured I would ask him if he wanted to go since he hadn't had a ton of experience. I said, I'm kind of either way on it. And he said he was the same. So I was like, well, then obviously I'm going to go slay the dragon, is what people like to say.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm gonna jump on this call. So my company officer drives me out there to meet up with engine three from station three. So once I get in there, we've got a crew of four inside this engine. Luckily, this county call was pretty close. Um, I mean, from like my station, station one where I was at, it's probably a 20-minute drive to get there.
Mm.
And when you're going lights and sirens, you get to go a little bit faster.
Yeah.
So we made it there probably in 10 to 15 minutes. We also have for county calls, volunteers respond to those calls as well, which isn't as the ideal thing would be to have a few engines fully career fire departments. Nothing against volunteer fire departments, but when you think of these people who have taken time out of their lives to respond to a call, they don't always have time to do training,
Yeah.
and they do training, but being paid career firefighter to train, we're training every single shift. We're training hours a week. Like we've got, you know, the knowledge and frequent practice. Volunteers are incredibly helpful. They're not ideal for them to run a call by themselves. That's
Right.
why we jump out there in the county to help them out. So we get out there, and it was kind of an interesting call when it came down. It was just a house in the county that was full of smoke, couldn't find any visible flames, didn't feel any heat.
Yeah.
And so when we hear something like that, we typically think there could be a fire with like an electric origin. So maybe there's some wires that got chewed through, maybe some wires that weren't fully taken care of,
Insulated.
splicing things together as it should have been. So yep. So we're wondering about fire, and if we don't see fire in the structure, we just see smoke. We're curious about fire in the attic, fire in the walls, fire in the chimney place is a pretty frequent one because it's just tough to clean out. People forget about it, and then all that stuff builds up in the chimney and catches fire. So we get there, and it's a two-story house. Since it's a county house, they're actually generally pretty fancy looking. So this is a pretty decent sized house. Um, and first get on scene, patients are saying they don't really know, or not patients, sorry, the homeowners are
Right.
saying that they don't really know what started the fire. They know their house is full of smoke. So we get in there. We have what's called a thermal imaging camera. We call it a tick, and that just helps us to when the visibility is super low, which it can be with smoke. I feel like a lot of movies will show people going into fires and you can see various rooms and things on fire, but when you go into a real structure fire, it's really hard to see. Generally you can see, like 4 to 5 feet in front of you, but after that it gets pretty hazy, and that's like good smoke conditions.
Yeah.
Once it gets bad, sometimes you can't see more than a couple inches from your face.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
get in there and it's decent smoke. We can see our feet, but you can't see much past that. So we're walking around with the tick and we're trying to see if we can find any heat, any flames anywhere. Don't see anything on the first floor, so we're told to go up into the second. This is me and another guy. We always do the two in, two out. So me and another firefighter. So we go upstairs. We're looking around. We think it could be an attic situation, could be in the walls, and we spent a decent amount of time looking around. Found no heat, no fire, nothing. Right. Even though the house was full of smoke, it was like 65 degrees in there. So it was weird seeing
Okay.
that. And
Yeah.
that's where you think there's a fire hidden somewhere. So we go back outside, kind of reconvene, figure out what we're gonna do. We're told that there's a weird little hidey hole behind a picture that's upstairs. It's a big old horse picture that they have. So we go upstairs. We finally, after a few minutes, you can't see, finally find where that picture is. We take it off, and there's a hole that you can kind of get into to access the attic, but it's real small. And we're in a structure fire. We're wearing about 75 pounds of gear
Yeah.
plus the hose plus tools. So something that I could get into normally in shorts and a t-shirt, there's like no way I can crawl up into
Right.
this hole. It's probably about 5 feet off the ground. So we kind of look in there with our tick and don't see any heat, so we end up going back out. By the time we had come back out, we had realized that understandably people were thinking our incident commander, which is the person that's generally in charge of the whole fire scene, tells everybody what to do. He's thinking there's a fire in the chimney, which I think makes sense. It's kind of a weird chimney because there's a decent fireplace in the living room, and I don't know, probably 3 or 4 feet wide. But then the chimney was on the interior of the house, so you could see this whole like chimney chase going up, and then couldn't see much past the ceiling. We knew we were on the first floor, so we figured it's maybe 10 to 12 foot ceilings, so going up there, right? And so they had sent some people in to kind of break some bricks off that chimney to see if we could see inside, see where the fire was. And that didn't have a whole lot of luck. They might have found some heat in there. Ideally, in these situations, we'd like to go up to the top of the chimney and just start flowing water down the chimney. But the apparatus, the truck that we needed for that was the truck at Station 2, which is the station that normally would have gone but didn't have enough people, right? And so we didn't have that truck has a ladder, so we would have been able to get to the top of that building, flow some water down the chimney. Might have had to kind of break away at the walls on the outside a little bit to really get all of the fire spread, but for the most part that would have taken care of the problem. But we didn't have that, couldn't call for it, it just wasn't available. So we had to, obviously, we're the people there to tackle the problem, so we can't
Yeah.
just wait for help. You got to do something.
Yeah.
We started trying to break, it was an all brick exterior of the house. So we were trying to break into the house from the outside where that chimney would be to see if we can break those bricks away and figure out where that heat is. But it was too thick. I personally didn't try to take out the bricks. It's actually people that were stronger than me trying to break out those bricks, and they were having no luck.
I got a
We
question.
decided yep, go for it. What's up?
So, like, is this house deserted, or is like the family standing
Nope.
outside, or
Family standing outside. Super, like I said, super fancy house. There was a pinball machine inside. Like it was definitely felt to me like a couple of retired folks went out and got their dream house they'd be looking
okay,
out in the
gotcha. Thank
prairie.
you.
So that's kind of the vibe of this place. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we decide to after they had minimal luck kind of breaking with the bricks of that chimney, a firefighter I was with, we were told to go in and continue to try to break those bricks off because really there's not a whole lot of other ways to expose this fire without just getting inside and starting to rip things apart, which not a lot of people will tell you this, but firefighters love breaking stuff. So we're all about getting in there and breaking bricks down.
Yeah.
So we
With
get
like
in
a
there, takes us,
sledgehammer or like
yeah. So
anything you can get.
we'll normally go in with a Halligan and an axe, and those are called irons when you go in with that like package. So it's a flathead axe typically. So it's got sharp side on one end, the other end is just that blunt. You can use it to hammer things in, whatever. And then a Halligan bar. Halligan's kind of hard to explain unless you've seen one. It's kind of like a crowbar. It's flat. It's got a leverage, like a flat piece on one end, crowbar looking piece on the other, and then a little pike. And so we went in with those tools initially. I grabbed a pike pole, which is like anywhere from generally 10 to be like 12 plus feet. I believe the one I had was a 12-foot pike pole. So it's just a long pole with a little pike at the end. So a little like spike kind of at the end that
Yeah.
you can use for smacking in, grabbing in, and pulling things off. So the guy I was with had the Halligan, so he was kind of breaking off bricks closer to the floor, and I had the pike pole, so I was trying to break them off a little higher up so we could tear out this full front piece of the chimney, expose all of it, and get that fire out. So we did that for a while. When I say a while, I mean maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Broke enough away that we could see some heat and fire inside that chimney place. Once we put some water on it, we realized we just didn't have a good enough angle to really get everything inside that chimney. Obviously, firefighters like breaking stuff. I was more than down to take that pike pole and start breaking bricks off that chimney.
Yeah.
So I'm just overhead swinging it at the chimney, grabbing a brick, pulling it down. Bricks are falling down. So there's like that fall hazard there already. So we're kind of being aware of that. Actually, take it back for just a second. Funny thing, I can't see well in a structure fire.
Right.
I didn't realize there was a very large picture frame on the chimney when I first started hitting it. So I'm standing in front of it, and I take my first swing at this chimney, and something falls on my head, made me almost poop my pants. Stressful. Then I realized it was just a picture frame. Everything's fine. The guy I was with kind of chuckled at me a little bit for thinking I was about to be a goner. And
Yeah.
so then we just get back to it. Um, and Probably after we exposed that first bit of chimney, probably my eighth swing or so, I felt when I pulled, it wasn't just a brick. I could feel that I was pulling significant weight down.
Yeah.
So once I pulled, kind of felt that. I think the guy I was with said something about it coming down. And then before I knew it, it hit me. Pardon the pun, I've used a few times, like a ton of bricks.
No.
I was able to, yeah, was able to kind of turn to my side when I realized it was coming down. And it knocked me to the ground. I think my left leg got stuck on something like an ottoman or some other piece of rubble that maybe had been kind of moved while we were doing the initial effort. So it got kind of like pinned up against something. So my back's on the ground, my leg is kind of up in the air, pinned on this thing, and the rest of the bricks came down, hit my knee, and I felt something bad happen. I wasn't sure exactly what happened, but it was a pretty significant pain, like almost immediately.
Yeah.
So I'm lying there doing the requisite yelling about being in pain. Realize I probably should be doing something instead of just laying there. So I go to get up, and that's when I hear that the guy I was with called out a Mayday, which is exactly what he ought to have done. I'm super proud to have that guy with me because he was on it like that. I've done a lot of Mayday training most of the time. In training, we train for a Mayday if we're lost. If you fall through the floor, if something happens that is going to make your chances of survival significantly less, then
Right.
that's a Mayday situation. So you just call out incident commander, tell them, here's some crazy stuff that happened. Here's where I am. Here's what I need. As I'm kind of coming back to it, I realize that he's called out a Mayday. I hear incident command come over the radio, and they're asking to repeat the Mayday because they can be kind of garbled because
Sure.
you're in a panicky situation. There's a lot of stuff going on. He was the one that was on the radio the whole time, so I looked at him and I was gonna let him repeat his Mayday, and that's when I realized he was pretty hurt. He was trying to grab his radio, but he wasn't able to get a hold of it. It
Yeah.
was normally there, the mic is right outside on our chest, clipped to our uniform, or clipped to the bunker coat, and his had come unclipped, so he's trying to grab it. His right arm for some reason isn't available to use, so I realized I should probably call out that Mayday, and so I just said exactly what the situation was. I think it was pretty close to what he had said initially, and that's when I saw that he was laying on his right side, kind of facing me. Again, the conditions are pretty bad as far as
Visibility.
visual.
Yeah.
Yep. So I tried to get over to him to see him better, but my leg was still up on whatever it had initially kind of gotten pinned up against. And so I was sitting kind of on my back, kind of like a reclined thing. I had the one leg up on some object, and I realized I couldn't move my leg because I didn't realize it at the time, but my knee was completely dislocated, and so I just couldn't make my leg move up off this thing. So I was able to kind of scoot over to him, saw that his right arm was pinned between his body and some glowing metal, which is when I realized that we had just pulled the fire down on top of us because it was in the chimney and now it's all around us.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I was able to I asked him if he was okay. I couldn't really understand what he was saying. I asked him, we're wearing our masks and everything. It can be tough to hear. I asked him if he was trapped, and I couldn't really hear quite what he said, but he did end up saying that his arm was burning. And so I looked down. I saw that his arm was pinned between his body and that glowing piece of metal. And so I did my best to kind of push him to the side and pull his arm out from that so he wasn't just leaning up against it. Because, you know, our bunker gear, our coats and our pants are super good at preventing us from dying when it gets too hot,
Yeah.
you know, for someone without gear. But if those clothes are pinched up against you, you're gonna feel that heat for sure.
Yeah.
And so I moved his arm. That was about the time that I felt that something hot had fallen in between my air pack and my coat. So I had a nice little burning sensation on my back because there's something trapped in there, some
Yeah.
hot something. So I tried briefly to kind of tug him out, but I had zero support to do it from with my legs still being caught up. I'm reached over all weird trying to grab him. And that's when one of our guys, a guy that I've enjoyed for a long time, really looked up to, he gives a lot of he'll give you a lot of guff, but he always people talk about how much he cares, and he definitely did. He was in there quicker than anybody else to go get us. He found me first. I was the closest to the door, and so he asked me if I was okay, and I said my knee is bad. I think I'm okay. I think he might be trapped.
Right.
So he comes up to me. So he goes to go past me to go help the other firefighter. And I said, wait, can you get my leg off of this thing so I can move? And he was my savior at that moment because he just grabs my bunker pants and tosses my leg off the thing it was caught up on, which didn't feel great, but
No.
it was nice to be able to actually move
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And that was when I really realized there was something wrong with my legs. I was trying to move it and it just hurt. It felt like my knee was just like a bag of marbles trying to move around.
Wow.
So he went over to the other firefighter. I was thinking about ways I could help, and then I realized I can't really do anything.
Right.
Like with my leg like this, I can't stand, I can't pull things. And so then I got to have the interesting experience of crawling out of that building on my knee that had just been blown apart. So that took longer than I would have liked it to.
Oh, wow.
I'm very thankful. There's a volunteer, a firefighter at the doorway that saw me kind of crawling out. He was able to grab my pack and lift me up a little bit so that I didn't have all that weight on my bad knee, get me out, pull me out of the structure. And then uh, shortly after that, that firefighter that came in with me was firefighter that came to get us was able to pull the other guy out of the building, get him on the ground, and that's kind of when I heard people were talking about how he may not be able to feel his legs. So that was a intense situation. You
Yeah.
know, we're laying there outside the structure and trying to figure out kind of what's happening. You know, I'm still processing everything that's going on right
Sure.
now. I feel like I can thank my Blake family lineage for this. One of the main things in my mind is how to make jokes out of this to make people
There you
feel
go.
fine, you know? So
This is gonna be
I was
great.
pretty much the whole time, yep, pretty much the whole time trying to alleviate some of that, you know, panic and fear and stuff with just making some jokes, making some people laugh was like my main goal at that time. They're able to get us into the ambulances, which showed up real fast. Got to the hospital, found out that my leg had dislocated and or my knee had. They weren't sure exactly what had happened in there. You know, I did X-rays and stuff, but they just knew that my knee was banged up. Otherwise, I was totally okay. The other guy ended up getting flown to Colorado, and since then, you know, this is a few months ago at this point. So since then, the initial flight out, he was fully paralyzed, couldn't feel his legs. He had broken his spine when the bricks hit him. Now he actually moves his legs better than I can move mine. So he's making awesome progress.
Good. Yeah.
They think that he's actually somehow going to make a full recovery, which is awesome because we were really worried that that was not going to be the case. So but yeah, after that, you know, now we're just on the road to recovery mostly.
Wow. What a story. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell I talked a lot because my mouth is dry.
Yeah, and I wondered, I have questions, and I wanna keep it brief so we can move on to other things as well, but, like, the radius, like, how far would you say so in my mind, like, the bricks are coming down from the shaft the chimney's in, and they're just kinda so the whole building is brick on the outside, but on the inside, it's probably just normal building materials, but the brick kind of flows down through that passage and then, like, kinda comes out in a radius around. Was it like that
So
or
it looked essentially if you can picture the fireplace, like I said, it was maybe 3 or 4 feet. The chimney was maybe a foot thinner, not quite that wide. But then it was just the chimney jutted out from the wall about
Right.
maybe 2 feet or so,
Oh, okay.
and just went straight up. Yeah. So it was essentially like having, if you pass a house and you see those chimneys on the outside where they go all the way up, where the fireplace is tucked up against the wall on the
Yeah.
inside. This one was just fireplace straight up from the chimney jutting out from the wall. That was I'm glad you brought that up because I had forgotten one of the things that made this a little more severe was we didn't realize it was vaulted ceilings, so we can't see up that high. We knew there was a
Right.
second floor, so we assumed it was like a 10-foot tall chimney. It was actually about 18 feet because
Right.
we couldn't tell that it went all the way up to the roof.
Mm.
And so would have been one thing if that 10 to 12 feet of chimney had fallen on us, but it was the full 18 feet of bricks that had toppled down, which definitely accounts for the more significant weight and impact, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Wow. Well, I'm filled with gratitude for the job you do, for the sacrifices you made, and in that moment, and the future ones you're gonna make, because I'm sure you'll recover and be right back at it, at the right time. But
Yep.
yeah,
That's what they're saying. They're saying I'll be able to go back to work. So that's awesome.
uh, yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be my bar story for quite a while,
you
I
got
feel
a good
like.
one.
I
You
can't really
got it.
think
I
of
mean,
anything much more interesting than that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I know a lot of veterans and they have a lot of really good stories, but yeah, I'm glad you're alive to tell the tale on this story, and I'm glad,
Yeah.
and I'm with you. Like, how can I make this is going to be the best joke ever, the best story ever. So I appreciate that too. And you're giving hope to other people because they're like, it's one thing and it affects you one way, but like the people around and the volunteer firefighters and the family and the
Oh,
other
yeah.
firefighters, you know, this kind of fear in that situation is contagious, and it could be like, "Oh no, he's gonna die," and like they can have PTSD away from it. So we're like, if you can tell a joke and you let them know you're gonna be okay, then you're helping everybody on the scene. You
Yeah, it
know?
alleviates it. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because when I was in the hospital, actually my company officer who had driven the ambulance to go get us was talking about his experience hearing that call out on the radio.
Yeah,
And it stressed me out hearing him talk about what I was involved in,
yeah,
hearing somebody say they heard out on the radio, structural collapse, 2 firefighters trapped. Like that gets your heart rate going for sure
oh
when you
yeah,
find that out because it's somebody that it's basically your brother, somebody that you've been working for years with. So
yeah,
yeah, it was an interesting situation. I should throw out there. I don't know if people are going to be concerned about this or not. The fire did get put out once we left. Once we really showed everybody where that fire was by pulling the chimney
yeah,
down, it was pretty easy to get out. And so that house, I actually drove past it about a month later, and it's looking good. They're already fixing that side of the house, so we were able to save 95% of that house, which is definitely what we're looking for. Luckily, there were no victims inside. They were able to get out in time, and so once we take care of the victim thing, we're just happy to not have to have this family move or build a new house.
right.
They're able to just do some
Well, and you can,
minor repairs and get it going again.
yeah, and you can understandably say, "Hey, can you name the new chimney after me?" Like Dominic's
For
chimney.
sure. Maybe just the road. Maybe just the road they were on. Just call it
I'm
Dominic
not
Road. I
picky.
think is
Road, a
reasonable.
county,
Not too
maybe
much to ask.
the lake,
Yeah, for
whatever,
sure.
your pond over here.
Yeah. I already got a nice little setup for my key to the city whenever I end up getting that.
Oh, is
That
that
was also a joke. I
oh,
don't think
okay.
I'm
No,
getting a
I
key
was
to the
like,
city.
"Wow, that's so cool." That seems like a good way to say thank you. Like, "Here's the key to the city,"
Sure.
you know? But I know being a firefighter is, to some extent, mostly from I'm very I don't know very much about it, but it seems like it's a thankless job. Like, you're doing all this stuff, carrying this burden, and getting injured, and, I'm glad you're talking about it because
And I'll tell you what, it's actually a very thankful job. We get thanked a lot. The ironic thing about that is most of the firefighters I work with do not want to be thanked. They don't feel like they're really doing anything that
right.
special. Most of the guys I work with, when people start stopping them in the grocery store and telling them how much they appreciate it, the guys I work with get real uncomfortable,
Right.
which I think is kind of interesting that as that is, I think that's the kind of person I want coming to help me when I need help. I don't, firefighters tend to be very, modest as far as their ability and the things that they've done. Where I haven't met a single guy that I work with that would ever call himself a hero. It's funny hearing me even say that. It just is not. It makes guys real uncomfortable. And I've had a couple people imply that about me since then, which feels really weird because essentially all I did was accidentally pull down a chimney, And I get there was a whole situation there going on,
Right.
but it's one thing where people do want to say thank you and it's always appreciated, but man, it makes most of us real uncomfortable getting that sort of attention for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I understand pretty well because it's the same way as being a vet.
I bet.
Yeah, when I
I
was
bet.
when I was in Iraq and this happened, "Oh, thank you for your service." And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, I was telling a story, and but I mean, I'm grateful for the people that are grateful too. So I don't want to, I want to throw that completely out, but at the same time, I understand the kind of frustration and the confusion that arises around. Oh, you're could arise. You're a firefighter. Well, thank you. Yeah, tell me a story. And you're like, man, I was just here to get some oranges. Hey,
Yep,
can I?
for sure.
So yeah, it can kind of get awkward at times.
But I'll tell you what, I would way prefer that to situation cops are dealing with, where we got great cops in Laramie, but it can be tougher 'cause, they're enforcing laws, and just like with cops, firefighters don't al fire departments don't always have top-notch guys. You wanna think they do, but, there's a lot of people there, so it doesn't always work perfectly, but I'm appreciative of the fact that we never have to be the bad guy. We are showing up exclusively to help, Um, and so I think the fire department in general really gets it somewhat easy as far as first responders are concerned, as far as public opinion, which is nice. And like again, I'm not going to say any, not going to take any particular stance on police department stuff, but I will say I work with a lot of good guys at the police department, like know of them, and they get it. They just get it tougher. They got to work for that trust a lot more than fire departments do.
Yeah.
We have gotten it pretty solid, since then. Again, not ever having to be the bad guy. We are just there to help, and that's it. So I feel super fortunate. That's the job I get to have. I don't have to get anybody in trouble. I'm simply there to
Yeah.
try to lessen, how bad somebody's day is.
Yeah.
So I think as far as first responder jobs go, it is definitely my dream job. It's worked out pretty well.
Good. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
that, and I hope people are inspired and decide not everybody, but those tough individuals that are made for it decide to be firefighters and serve the
sure.
public that way, and
And you'll,
go ahead.
I
Okay.
was just going to say, you'll figure out if you're made for it or not during academy because it can get pretty uncomfortable there.
Okay. Well, awesome, and I've had a sheriff's deputy on one of my episodes, and he shared some stories, and yeah, they face a whole different world, than a firefighter or even military, you know,
Yeah, for sure.
and I appreciate them and just like you said. But I was thinking also about how contagious, and this is how rabbit holes work. So here, welcome to rabbit holes for real
Down
now.
for it.
Like I was thinking about,
Rabbit holes all day, every day.
I've been thinking about every day or lately, I've been thinking about how contagious fear is. Because, and if you don't know anything about fear, which everybody's already an expert, they may not realize it. Like, just get into beekeeping. Right? And just have a bee that hates you and, like, buzzes around your head, like, real life confession here, only true talk, like, I scream like a girl and run for my life, and it's the smallest thing, and it's got 1 stinger, you know, maybe not as much anymore, but definitely right when I first got into it, I got stung 2 times, and I'm like, no, beekeeping is not for me." Then I got honey, and I was like, "Well, maybe I'll get a better suit," and so that's how it progressed.
There you go. Yeah.
But it's so funny from human to human to me, well, ironic, like you were talking about. You come out and everybody is even more stressed out and afraid than you are, and you're like, "Hey, I'm the injured guy. What's going on?" And you tell a joke and you kinda calm them down, but it's so contagious, it goes to however many miles away to where your commander was, and
Yeah,
he's
for
driving
sure.
the ambulance, and he's afraid that somebody's not gonna pull through or somebody's gonna die or he can't see it and there's the fear of the unknown. So, Yeah, that's a real
for sure.
dynamic, and I don't like how that works though, because
I do think
go ahead.
the nice part, what you're saying though, the kind of balancing portion of it is, I don't think fear is any more contagious than courage is.
Mm,
I've found that a lot of times in my job where you're working with somebody that knows more than you. If they start acting panicked, then yeah, you're gonna start panicking. But it's the exact same way in reverse, which I can tell you from experience. I've ran calls where I'm like, wow, this sounds like a lot. I don't know how prepared I am to do this, but I'm going to put on a brave face, walk up and do the best I can.
yeah.
And I've run calls where the person I was with who was newer than me, I asked them afterwards, I was like, yeah, it's kind of sketchy, huh? And they maybe didn't even think so, or maybe they were like, well, I kind of thought it was, but you just kind of went after it and we're all professional and getting it done. So I just did it too. Like it definitely can be in the
Mm,
exact same way where I don't realize I was in a situation that was pretty stressful until afterwards. Cause I'm like, yeah, the guy I was with was acting like this was no big deal.
yeah,
Like he's just going to go in and get it done. So that's what I'm going to do too. So I think it's unfortunate and can be pretty stressful how contagious, yeah, fear is. But I think courage works the exact same way where if you can put on a brave face or someone else puts on a brave face around you, I think it does a lot to just getting people to focus up on just getting that job done, the best they can.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Well, that's why it's rabbit holes, and that's why I have you as my guest because man,
Oh,
that's powerful. That is powerful.
just
Wow.
stuff I've dealt with.
Yeah. Well, and it's so I mean, and I think about military, and I think about my time in the Marine Corps, and I think about they would always tell us these stories from like World War II or Vietnam, and you know, one I'm going to get similar close to a story like one of the ones they told us where the guy, like his whole team died, and it was him and a machine gun and a pistol, and his helmet and stuff like that, and he was like shot 12 times or something, and he kept pushing back the enemy force and running across this berm and shooting that one, shooting this machine gun, and going over here behind this machine gun, and just waves and waves of them are coming, and all his guys are wounded on the ground, you know, and then, he gets a Medal of Honor or something else, and they would keep reading us these stories in the Marine Corps. It was part of our, you know, mentorship. It's part of our, growth and leadership training and stuff like that. And you're like, wow, yeah, maybe I could do that, and so it's like it's it's a precursor. So in combat, it's just like you said, and I've not been in an intense combat situation throughout my disclaimer like this, but I've read biographies and one guy, I think his name is Sledge. Just briefly, he wrote his autobiography was from when he was in Guadalcanal in that area of the Pacific War, from World War II. And he said that the first thing that happens in a firefight, and you reflected this in your story, is the first thing you do is poop your pants. So it's not glorious, and you're like, well, that's not courage. No, but that's your body's first reaction to this is dangerous. I'm going to die. Like fight or flight, it doesn't have no room for none of that nonsense in your guts. It's like goodbye, which is why we blouse our boots. Because if everybody poops at the same time, the ground gets slippery. So everybody
Sure,
wants to
yeah, it's
catch
tough
it.
then.
It's so funny. I didn't even know why we bloused our boots. So I read that biography. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of similarities there.
Sure.
But courage. So
It's interesting
go ahead.
too,
Go ahead.
talking about fear real quick. I was way more, to say I was more afraid going into that building than having the chimney fall on me is a weird way to say it because it's true, but we're trained to go into these things, so I wasn't actively afraid. But going into, a fire, there's going to be that element of like, whew, okay, let's do this. You know what I mean?
Right.
One of the interesting things I didn't really think about much until after those bricks had fallen on us, I wasn't afraid at all. Like not even not trying to brag about any sort of situations, but I it happened and then it was like after getting done yelling about my knee, it was just go mode. It
Yeah.
wasn't until after the fire that I got actually afraid. Like I remember showed up to my house at 3 a.m. I woke up my girlfriend. She had been sleeping peacefully before that, which I was stoked for because she didn't have time to worry about anything.
Right.
And I remember telling her about it, and I was like shaking the whole time.
Yeah.
Not like necessarily actively afraid, but having that adrenaline dump. And
Sure.
that's when I kind of realized that during that, I wasn't actually afraid. It was time to make decisions.
Right.
It wasn't until after everything calmed down that I was like terrified. I was terrified about what was going to happen to my buddy. I was terrified about if I was going to be able to work again. Like all that kind of comes in afterwards, which I, as weird as it sounds, was just thankful for that there wasn't any of that at the moment. It was just time to get things done.
Yeah.
I got to really ruminate on being panicky afterwards, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's a good time, right? That's the perfect time to be upset and afraid when you're safe and out of harm's way. It's
Yep,
like,
everything's okay. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for reflecting back on that. And just feel free to reflect back on anything else about it anytime. But yeah, it's just I'm and I don't have like a clear this is connected to this and let me teach everybody something. This is more like let me think about this out loud for a minute and think about contagious fear, but also contagious courage. And I guess I'm connecting dots here, it's like it's the training and it's the mentoring, at least for us in the Marine Corps, that when it's so intense. Obviously, our boot camp is the longest and maybe arguably the hardest. I'm biased, so I'm just gonna kind of leave it tentative there. But it gets
Of
you to the
course, of course.
point when bullets start flying, you're like, finally, right? Finally. Like I imagine how you feel when you see a fire. You're like, that's what I joined for right there. It's elusive, it's hiding in the walls, I don't see it. Man, I've been on 15 transport missions. Give me a freaking fire. That's what I've been training for. And that's the way Marines are. That's the way the Marine Corps is. It's like, especially for us coming out into the 2000s, all the 90s is kind of peacetime. Marines are just like angry bees waiting in the hive like, is it springtime yet? Is it springtime yet? Like, and, when they say Marines pray for war, it sounds crazy, but we're not, like, on our knees with our hands folded. We're, like, watching the news like, "Hey, guys. Hey, look. No, no, no. Look, the Twin Towers. We're going to war." And everybody's like, "Yeah."
We get to go to work. Yep.
We get to do our job, right? And so it's kind of like, the FAFO, acronym, if you know what that stands for.
I don't know if I know FAFO.
F around and find out.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the acronym for that. I'm gonna have to
Okay.
start using it.
It's new to me, so I'm not, like, light years ahead of you, but it's just, like, it's a new thing, but I'm glad I could introduce that to you
Sure.
in acronym form.
Thank you.
But it's like we're wait
I knew I was gonna learn on this thing.
You are so welcome. Everybody learns, right? Everybody learns on this thing because we're in unexplored territory. I mean, you shared a story and you're still reflecting on it, but yeah, it's a human condition. We weren't born with the instruction manual, and that's what I like to think about.
I
Yeah,
thought it was is interesting you bringing up, Marines waiting, almost wanting to go to war. And it's the same thing with the fire department where we have to kind of be like coached through this to one of the big things I remember being told when I was starting out is don't smile on the fire scene. Like everybody at the fire department knows that we are so excited to actually get to work
I
and
love
put
it.
a fire out. But you also have to remember somebody's house is burning down. So,
Yeah,
like, there's been, you can look up on YouTube, if you look up videos of firefighters, there's definitely videos of various departments where firefighters are like high fiving on the fire scene because they are just a couple of like latent pyromaniacs that love breaking things and they're super excited to
of
really
course.
do what they trained for.
Yeah,
But you also have the family standing right outside watching, their house burn down. So we're kind of in that same boat where it's like you love the job, everybody knows you love the job, but you need to cool it down a little bit once
yeah,
you're like on the fire scene. Like keep it professional. You can high five and stuff once you get back to the station and talk
yeah,
about all the cool stuff you did.
yeah. I'm glad, and that's the Marine Corps too, right? I mean, that's the Marine Corps too when we have to deal with the public, or we deal with America, or news cameras are there, right? But
For
when
sure.
there's nobody there, and they're like, okay, you guys can now attack the terrorists in Marja or in Fallujah or something like that. You got to imagine those guys seeing Marines smiling and high fiving as they take them
Mhm.
out, right? Like, we're walking down the streets with a smile, whistling a tune, and making headshots, it's and as
Yeah,
callous
for sure.
and I know people are gonna hear that and be like, "Oh my gosh, they're a bunch of killers." Like, I know maybe you didn't wanna know what happens for America to be the great country that it is, protected and everything else. And all these things are debatable, but yeah, just know the same thing for firefighters is for Marines. Like, there's a camera. Man, this sucks. I hate this. Everybody be sad, but the
Yep.
firefighters.
I feel that. I think as far as Marines, I want to know that our, military force is full of people that are good at combat and like combat, like what they do. I feel like that helps. I think the same thing is true with firefighters. I want my fire department, wherever I live, to be guys that like working fires.
Right,
Obviously, nobody likes like somebody losing their home.
right.
Nobody likes, I'm assuming, going to war and losing friends or having difficult decisions. But the guys that are going into that, I think it's great to have people that are there for that job.
Passionate.
And I think,
They're
yep, if
passionate
you're
about it.
passionate about it, you're just gonna do a better job,
Yeah.
And so it's definitely true with firefighters. You chat with guys and they get so excited. It's called, what I've heard people say is they call it Job Town when you get a fire call. It's time to go to Job Town, which I think is funny, because it's for that family, it's like this intense situation, and then for us, we're all just, you know, game mode,
Yeah.
like in the zone, but also just so excited to go actually do this thing that we've been training on for years,
I mean, you
So
get a ride on fire trucks and ambulances. It's like a world where nobody else gets to go. It's like your own special domain. Well, and I know we're getting close to the end of the time and you got to go pretty quick, but was there anything last minute or any last revelations or before you leave?
One thing I think is important to talk about with all this is I think any big situation, something where people get hurt, something like that, and it can happen in your everyday life too. I think it's real easy to take blame for it. And I think that's something that can really mess with you. Talking about the collapse, mentioning that I was pulling down that brick, like there's no matter really which way you look at it, as far as that chimney going down, I pulled the chimney down. And it's something that initially was pretty tough, but it's something that you can work through. There's not even necessarily just passing blame, but like looking at the whole situation.
Yeah,
At the very least, it's never beneficial to just blame yourself for things.
right,
If you want to acknowledge something and work on getting better at it, that's awesome. But just blame isn't helpful.
right.
I struggled with that for, a few weeks after the incident.
Yeah.
One thing that helped me was talking with the other guys that were there, and everybody else that was at that call blames themselves the exact same or
Huh.
more for what happened.
Yeah.
So it's just a human thing that we do. Something happens and you just think I should have done this different or better. And obviously hindsight's always 2020. But one thing I think I gained from this experience that was super positive is finding like learning that just holding on to that blame for stuff is not helpful. If you want to use that experience to try to make yourself better, that's great. But just sitting there and feeling bad about yourself isn't going to help anybody. It's not going to help you. And so it took me some time to kind of work through that and chat with the other guys. I think there's actually been a super helpful time as far as, helping me grow just as a emotionally intelligent person and kind of learning the best ways that I can kind of maneuver throughout this
Yeah.
world. You know
Well,
what
and
I
that's
mean?
such a valuable
So,
lesson to
yeah, that's my
learn.
last thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate you
Yep,
sharing
for
this.
sure.
Such a valuable lesson, and to learn it at your age. I know you're a lot younger than me, and to learn that lesson because so many
Basically a child.
do what now?
I said basically a child. I
Well, I
am.
can't say that when you got that beard, right? There's just no way. It's like
Nah, thank you.
you're all man all the time. Like you got so many man cards. If you could deal me a few, like just let me borrow a couple, I'll give them back. But no, but that's a
You're
really
making me blush.
good. That's what we do for each other. We're cousins, right? We're just like, let me see if this
Absolutely.
is gonna get him to blush or not. I feel
There you
like
go.
that's how you
There's some
design
compliments.
stories. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm just throwing on. I'm saying nothing of any real substance right now. I'm throwing jokes out there as you're talking, so you can go.
But yeah, thank you for that, and that's an important lesson about blaming ourselves that really applies to any part of our life. taking responsibility and deciding to focus what you want to learn and how which direction you want to grow, that's one thing. Sitting in your recliner, recliners aren't my favorite place in the world, sitting in a recliner and feeling bad about all the people affected, and you're only a percent responsible. And I like how the military does it, and I know I'm being really brief here, but, you know, if somebody, let's say your whole fire team is wiped out, then people like to blame themselves. Well, you have an officer who made that decision, and it goes all the way up the chain of command to the president and to Congress and to the American people. And so, if you really look at it in the right way, you could say, okay, well, they died because I went over there, but I didn't know it was going to happen. So I'm maybe 1 to 3% responsible, and I can learn and choose to do something different next time. But yeah, you don't get anywhere blaming. Yeah.
Yeah, I like your use of that word. I think that's a good way to look at it is taking responsibility for things, for the things that you can. Also acknowledging, because my situation is the exact same, where I can take responsibility for various things that I wish I had and hadn't done in ways that I can improve from that. But also, like you said, looking up, like there were tons of events happening way before this that led to this thing happening.
Right.
And it's luckily we have a pretty solid department, so a lot of that stuff is currently being looked at from this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I don't think it's beneficial to say there's nothing I could have done. I don't think it's beneficial to say it's all my fault. I like the way you put it, where you take responsibility for the things you can and focus all that attention on just getting things figured out, working better. There's no use in just sitting there and feeling bad about yourself. So
Yeah.
I like that way of looking at it a lot.
Well, thank you, and thank you for saying so. Well, we're out of time, but man, what a treat it is to have
Absolutely.
you on
Thank
the
you
show,
for having
and
me
we'll
on,
talk
dude.
to you later.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
bye.
Sounds good.